for tuning into this 2020 primary election candidate forum for District 22 of the Washington State Senate. This forum is presented by the League of Women Voters of Thurston County, along with Thurston Community Media, TCMedia, and is being held electronically due to COVID-19. Candidates, moderators, and timers are all joining on Zoom with help from TCMedia. The League is a nonprofit organization that encourages informed and active participation of citizens in their government. The League neither supports nor opposes candidates nor parties. We are nonpartisan. The League registers new voters, studies issues, and advocates for its positions with the legislature and other governmental bodies. Despite its name, the League is open to all people over age 16. The candidates for District 22 are Garry Holland, Sam Hunt, and Kevin Young. I'm Steve Tilley from the League, and I'll moderate this forum. The timer will show you a sign when you have 30 seconds left, and then we'll show a stop sign when your time is up. In case you can't see the signs, I'll tell you when your time is up. We'll start with a 1-minute statement from each of you about why you are the most qualified for this position. Then I'll ask a series of questions. The first responder for each question will have 2 minutes for a response, followed by a 1-minute response from each of the other candidates. There will be 1 minute for closing statements at the end. I'll call on you when it's your turn to speak. Now we'll start with 1-minute statements about why you're the most qualified for this position, starting with Garry Holland, followed by Sam Hunt, and then Kevin Young. Garry Holland.
Hi there. I'm a 33-year retired employee from the state of Washington. I had a great career there. I've done a lot of volunteer work with the PTAs and the booster clubs. I've been a longtime volunteer with my community church youth programs. I'm very interested in working in the state Senate and bringing some changes and some new ideas.
Okay. Sam Hunt?
Well, thank you and welcome. It's a little different year this year. We're doing this and there's no Pride Parade today. This is Pride Week, so I'd like to celebrate that. And just quickly, you know, I've been in the, this is my 20th year in the legislature, 16 years in the House, and this is my first term in the Senate. I serve on I chair the State Government and Elections Committee, the Ways and Means Committee, which is the Budget and Finance Committee, and K-12 and Early Learning. I lived in the community since 1980 and have, I think, a lot we need to do. This is a very tough time. My experience will count as we address things like, you know, what we've been seeing with the needs for Black Lives Matter, for funding education, for addressing our huge budget shortfall, somewhere between $6 and $8 billion, and also working on healthcare. This COVID thing has shown what a tragedy our healthcare system is, and it needs to be reformed.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt.
Stop.
Kevin Young.
Hello, I'm Kevin, and I'm a single father, and I have a 5-year-old in kindergarten, so schools are important to me. I graduated from Evergreen in 2007 in biology and chemistry, and 2013 from University of Houston with a degree in environmental science. And with all the pandemic and climate change and unsustainable fisheries and timber practices, I feel like my background has a lot to offer in the challenges that we're facing coming ahead with scientific literacy that I think is lacking in a lot of areas of government right now, and it's becoming apparent. And I've worked for the state off and on as a biologist, and I've seen a lot of my entire generation suffer with underemployment and lack of quality employment with the state and not with the state. And I think the state should lead by example in that. And I'm here because I have the chance to do some community service.
Thank you. Now for the following questions, the first respondent will have 2 minutes. Subsequent respondents will each have 1 minute. I'll rotate who responds first. The first question is, the state is facing serious budget issues. What are the areas you would protect from budget cuts, and what do you think should be cut? Sam Hunt, followed by Kevin Young, and then Garry Holland.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad to see Kevin's a Cougar. The wrong Cougar. I'm a WSU Cougar, but well, as I mentioned, we face a $6 to $8 billion shortfall. I think the first thing that's most important is we need help from the federal government. To try to take $6 to $8 billion out of a budget is a huge cut. A number of items are already protected, like K-12 basic education, some of our health care, things like that can't be cut. And I would rather see a balance of new revenue and very careful budget cuts as we go through this. I don't want to gut our environmental program. I don't want it to, gut our unemployment, which is basically federal, but things like that. So I will work very hard for both revenue and for very skillfully cut, budgets where we have to do it.
Thank you. Kevin Young?
I would think education. I mean, I know before all this happened, the state hasn't been pulling its weight on the K through 12 education. And a lot of school districts have been running at a massive deficit for years, including the Olympia School District. And so I think not only should that money be saved, but it needs to be increased. And as far as cuts and things, I know there's a lot of support right now for police reform and cutting their budgets down some and trimming some of their excess. And if we can find responsible ways to do that, that would be great.
Thank you. Garry Holland?
Yes, with the large budget deficit we have, I think there's several things we can do to balance the budget. I think we start off by cutting all elected officials' pay by 10%. Then we move into freezing all hiring for the state, limit all promotions. For now, no promotions. We also need to look at rolling back all the increased spending that the last legislative session put into place. I think those steps will get us along the path to fiscal stability again. If we hadn't used all the money in the rainy day fund, we probably would be in a better shape if we were depositing money into that during the good years, and we'd have it available to us right now.
Thank you. The next question is, the pandemic has revealed deep problems within our healthcare system, including mental health. What steps would you take to ensure people have access to care and can afford it? Kevin Young, followed by Garry Holland, and then Sam Hunt.
Hi. Well, I'm a big proponent of universal health care. I think it's worked great in pretty much the rest of the world at this point. And I think everybody should have access to health care. And I think at the federal level, state level, everybody should be working towards allowing everyone to get access to quality health care. It's just a basic right that people should have. It shouldn't be a struggle or a question that we should have to answer.
All right, thank you. Garry Holland?
I think that all people are entitled to health care. Everybody should have health care. I think one of the easiest ways we could have expanded health care was to expand basic Medicaid in our state. We've gone beyond that. One of the other problems we have with mental health, which you asked about, is Western State Hospital. We gave up $53 million a year in federal funding for Western State Hospital. Instead of putting money into fixing the problems there, we gave up the revenue instead. And so I think we've made some bad decisions, and we need to make better decisions about healthcare for all state citizens. And fixing our mental health care system is a priority to help people survive these times.
Thank you. Sam Hunt?
Thank you. Well, just one quick thing. The rainy day fund, we left over $3 billion in the rainy day fund when we adjourned in March, thinking that was going to be sufficient, not knowing what we faced with a huge unknown pandemic. Mental health, we have increased funding for mental health substantially the last 2 or 3 years. Still not enough. And one thing I want to see us do is to move away from the institutionalized mental health like Western State, which is in an old, deteriorating building, and move to more deinstitutionalized mental health services.
All right, thank you. How should the state of Washington address climate change? Garry Holland, followed by Sam Hunt and then Kevin Young.
I think if you're going to address climate change, you need to have a state by state, all 50 states involved in the decision process. We can take actions here to clean up our energy sources, make cars more efficient, make any coal burning plants that are may still be open need to be pure burning. We need to make sure that all of our we're not polluting the environment, and so I get that part. The part we can't control is what other countries do, like China, in their when they pump all that pollutants into the air. I think that we need to seriously think about how much effort and time we're going to put into clean energy. All of our solar power, wind power, those things make sense on a financial basis and on an ecological basis.
Thank you. Sam Hunt?
Well, thank you. We've had a couple of pieces of legislation that passed the House that have not passed the Senate, which, I wish we had. Clean fuels and some issues like that. We have passed major legislation for efficient buildings, for reducing and eliminating fossil fuels. We did take the action several years ago to close the coal plant at Centralia Chehalis, and we need to follow, I think the governor's lead. He's been a very strong leader on what we should do for energy conservation and for helping our environment and for having a clean energy field. More emphasis on high mileage cars, I guess, high miles per gallon cars and vehicles, and also increase use of public transportation so we can get cars off the road.
Thank you. So what is your position on creating a personal income tax to raise revenue? Sam Hunt, followed by Kevin Young, and then Garry Holland.
I have been a longtime advocate of a state income tax. I think it would be very beneficial for our state. At the same time, we can't just add an income tax. If I were tax god for the state, I would implement a state income tax, eliminate the B&O tax, replace it with a corporate income tax, and reduce the property taxes and the sales taxes, and institute a high earners tax in the state as well, so that we'd have a balanced budget that has more sources of revenue and would be less likely to drop us into a pit like we have right now, where we're so heavily dependent on the sales tax.
Hey, Kevin, did you get to respond to the prior question?
Okay.
Oh, I didn't.
I'm sorry, did I miss you?
You did.
Oh, I'm really sorry.
So
The question was, how should the state of Washington address climate change?
I think, focusing on renewable energy sources and building that industry and the industry behind that and generating incentives for that at the industrial level and at the everyday person, from their cars, their homes, etc. And then I'd like to see collaborating because it is not just a localized issue. It is the entire planet, starting like with our response with the COVID and getting multiple states to kind of join forces and be able to pressure the federal government at the federal level more to do more. And I'd like to see it kind of a collaborative effort across the board to address the climate change and stricter policies.
Thank you. And what is your position on creating a personal income tax to raise revenue?
I'm not a fan of income tax. I will appreciate the fact that here in Washington we don't have it. I do think the large businesses get far too many tax breaks. And I think if we could find ways to tax them more, I know our property taxes are insanely expensive. And I know California struggles with having both income tax and high property taxes. And I think if we have an income tax and high property taxes, it's just going to snowball on people and be a real struggle for people. But I would like to see less corporations getting massive tax breaks and paying their share.
Thank you. Garry Holland?
I'm opposed to an income tax. I hear the discussion from the other side that sales tax is inequitable or not a fair tax. But when we go, when an income challenged person goes to buy $1,000 car, they pay let's say that the tax rate is 8%, it's $80 in tax. But when a wealthy individual goes and buys a $100,000 car, it's an $8,000 sales tax on the car, for instance, it's as an example. So I think that there's plenty of revenue in the state of Washington already. There's plenty of revenue in our budget. I think that we can manage that budget. We can spend money appropriately. We can go in and look in places that where we can balance the budget out by reducing in some places and increasing other places, like maybe working more on the homeless issue. There's other ways to take care of this other than an income tax.
Thank you. Next question is, at what level of government should the issue of homelessness be addressed? Do you see this as a local issue or is a broader response needed? Kevin Young, followed by Garry Holland, and then Sam Hunt.
Hello. Well, I think the homeless issue needs to be addressed kind of from the bottom up. Local communities know their communities best. They know their immediate needs best and are there to respond the quickest to those emerging needs. But that's not to say the state doesn't have a role or the counties don't have a role in providing support and funding for the local communities to address the issue and provide services and things to help alleviate that. But not every small community is the same. And the state can't oversee every small community's need. And so I think it should be immediately addressed at the very local level and then supported as you move up the chain.
Thank you. Garry Holland?
I think it's an issue for all of us, all levels of government. I think that the local community governments know best what's best for their community, which should be then supported by the county, the state, even federal dollars if they're going to give us housing funds. I think that the local communities understand their people. The state can jump in and be helpful in that process, working through the process of housing our homeless. We have issues like how do we also help Section 8 housing? There's a federal program. There's a long waiting list on there. If we jump in and help clear that Section 8 housing list by housing those people who've been waiting on there for a couple of years, that will help resolve the problem.
Thank you. Sam Hunt?
Well, it's obviously a federal, state, and local problem. We passed legislation this last year that Representative Dolio and Dolan and I worked on to allow city councils and local governments to have councilmatic authority to address funding, raise local taxes to address the homeless thing. Certainly in Olympia, we have the home fund that Council Member Bateman got passed in the city of Olympia, and it's something that we have to do locally. It's something we have to do statewide. For instance, the Billy Frank Housing Center next to the IT Center was funded through federal funds, and the new facility on Martin Way had some state assistance as well to open that. So, and it goes deeper than that. It starts with education. It starts with having an education system that really addresses the needs of all people. As we've seen, it does not, including what happens with our minority kids.
Thank you. So the last question is, what steps would you take to ensure that people of color are treated fairly by law enforcement and within the criminal justice system? Garry Holland, followed by Sam Hunt, and then Kevin Young.
I think that there needs to be extensive training of all of our law enforcement, correctional officers. We need to make sure that they understand that everybody is treated in a quality manner, no matter what happens, what the situation is. I mean, that's an ongoing thing. Many police departments work on that. making sure that there's not a problem. That needs to continue. We're going to need law enforcement officers, either the county sheriff, I live out in the county, the deputies, or the city police. They need to all have training to make sure that they're all people are treated equally and fairly with respect.
Thank you. Sam Hunt?
Well, I'll try to run through a quick list here because it is an important problem. We need to address demilitarization of police. We should not be selling them surplus military equipment. We should have body cams on all of our law enforcement people. We should prohibit chokeholds, and as the State Patrol did yesterday, announced that it will not use tear gas and chemicals anymore in situations. I think those are very important. Training, as Garry said, is extremely important to have our law enforcement officers trained and know how to deal in situations. And I also think there are many situations where we don't need to send a policeman. You can check out the Cahoots program in Eugene, Oregon, where they have social workers and crisis people who oftentimes are the first people to show up rather than the police. And I think we need to look at some very inventive sorts of things to take the pressure off of police and also to help the community.
Thank you. Kevin Young?
Hi. I agree with pretty much everything Sam Hunt just said. I would like to see more community oversight put in that actually has some teeth to it, and to be able to hold officers accountable for their actions and stand up to strong police unions and things, so that they actually are accountable for their actions and have some nonpartisan community oversight to ensure that they are in fact serving the people and protecting the people that they're hired to serve and protect. And along with that, again, I agree with everything Sam Hunt just mentioned, the big long laundry list of issues I think need to be addressed.
We Cougars have to stick together, you know.
Thank you. Now each candidate will have the opportunity for a 1-minute closing statement. We'll start with Kevin Young, followed by Sam Hunt, and then Garry Holland.
Okay, well, thank you for having me here today. And I'm here because I'm a father that has the ability to step away from his career and do some community service. And I have a scientific background to bring scientific literacy to policy, make sure the policy is going to do what we intend it to do. And it has scientific backing. And I've watched all of my cohort who came into adulthood during the Great Recession struggle with quality employment and quality jobs, even with working for the state has been a struggle with low pay, low benefits, a lot of temporary positions, never getting permanent. And I'd like to do my part to make the world a better place for my daughter and move our community forward in positive change. So, thank you.
Sam Hunt?
Well, thank you. And thank you to the League of Women Voters for doing this. It's certainly different this year rather than sitting together in a studio. I want to put my experience in the legislature and in the county and the city to work. I served on the North Thurston School Board for 8 years. I'm a former teacher. I have a good background in education, and I want to work on that. And certainly, as has been mentioned, I voted against the education funding proposal several years ago because of its heavily dependence upon the property tax. I thought it was unfair to further jack the property tax up for all sorts of people in all sorts of communities. Plus, it's terribly inequitable. So I would continue to work on finding better and more equitable funding for our K-12 system. As I mentioned, working for comprehensive health care and in trying to deal with a huge budget deficit that we face and how we get out of this hole. And I would like to work on that and continue to address the needs of our county and our state.
Thank you. Garry Holland?
For this opportunity. It's very hard to campaign or do anything in this environment. And so we're all trying to figure out how to do that. I appreciate this opportunity because it gives me an opportunity to talk a little bit about what I believe as a Republican, where I go as a Republican, where I go as a citizen of our state. And being a citizen is more important than any political stand I might take, because we all live in this community. We all live in the 22nd legislative district, and we have people around us that we love and cherish, and our friends and our communities and our churches. My only thing that we didn't address that I would like to just mention is I'm opposed to the sex education bill as passed by the legislature. That's now a state law that sexually educates 5 through 12-year-olds. I don't think it's a good idea, and I wish they hadn't passed it.
All right. Thank you to candidates Garry Holland, Sam Hunt, and Kevin Young for participating in this forum.
Thank you.
And thank you to Thurston Community Media for producing this program. The forum will be available on TCMedia channels, the League website, and on YouTube. To our viewers, we are glad you have taken the opportunity to view this forum. We remind you to vote in the primary election beginning July 17th and closing on August 4th, 2020.